Today on Math Review, we're doing Lesson 8, Topic A, also known as shapes and cubes and other stuff. So, that terrible intro out of the way, let's get to work. When we first talked in Lessons 1 and 2, we had a lot of vocabulary thrown at us about different shapes and how to identify them. So, recapping Lesson 1, we talked about lines, sides, angles, and polygons. Well, let's start off with the most important one, which is line. A line is a straight length that has two endpoints. Now, that's a fancy definition for that. But as we can see, it's a length of color, in this case, that has a starting point and an ending point. Or this can be the start, and that can be the end. Now, lines are important because we use multiple lines to create our polygons. A polygon is a shape made up of multiple lines. And we can see that here. This rectangle has 1, 2, 3, 4 lines making it up. Now, when we're talking about lines and in the context of polygons, they have different names. Instead of these four things being known as lines, they are called sides. A side is a unique line that is part of a shape. Why do I say unique? Well, each of these is a different side of this shape. So even though they're connected, they're all different lines. That's why they're unique. Now, lastly, we learned about angles. An angle is a point where two lines meet. So this line here and this line here would meet at this point. This is also known as a corner, an easy way to remember. Now, we learned about different types of polygons the next day. We learned about 5 different kinds so far. We learned about quadrilaterals, triangles, circles, pentagons, and hexagons. Now, in order from sides and side numbers, we can start with a circle. A circle is a shape with no sides made up of one line. Now, let's make one that doesn't have a filling so we can see. This circle doesn't have any corners. So it doesn't have any sides. Instead, it's just one line that connects to itself. The next shape we learned about was a triangle. Now, a triangle is a polygon made up of 3 sides. And that also means it has 3 angles. So let's count. 1, 2, 3 sides, 1, 2, 3 angles. That's what makes a triangle unique. After triangles, we learned about squares and other quadrilaterals. Quadrilaterals have 4 sides, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4 angles. And then we have pentagons, which have 5 sides and 5 angles. And last but not least, the hexagon, which has 6 sides and 6 angles. Okay. Our next lesson focused on us telling the difference between different quadrilaterals. Now, a quadrilateral, just to recap, is a 4-sided shape, but there are multiple kinds of them. So, we also need to know about something called parallel lines. A parallel line is a pair of lines that will never touch. So, if I drew these perfectly straight, these 2 lines would never cross each other. And to show you an example of what parallel lines are not, these are not parallel lines because they cross at this point. And these are not parallel lines because if I kept drawing this top line out, it would eventually touch this bottom line. Okay, so now that has been decided, let's take a look at the second thing we're talking about, which is square corners. Let's take a look at this rectangle I've drawn. A rectangle is a quadrilateral that has two pairs of parallel lines and squared corners. Now, a squared corner means that it looks like the corner of a square. There is one line going perfectly straight up and down, and one line going perfectly straight left and right. A shape can have corners that are not square, but in order for it to be a rectangle, it must have two pairs of parallel lines and squared corners. Okay, so let's take a look at a special rectangle that we all know and love called a square. Now, what makes a square different from a rectangle? Well, a square, just like a rectangle, has two pairs of parallel lines, but it also has sides that are all the same length. This line going up and down is the same length as this line going left and right. And it's the same for all four lines. Next, we have parallelograms. Now, a parallelogram is a little bit different of a shape. It's a shape that has two parallel lines, but the two sets of parallel lines, but the parallel lines make it so that they don't have squared corners. So, as we can see, we can't take this square, for example, and put it up next to this corner. It doesn't line up. There's a little bit extra hanging on this side. And if we took it to the other side, our square corner is too big. The line cuts through it. So this is a parallelogram. We're going to pretend I drew this perfectly. These top and bottom lines won't touch, and this line on the right and the line on the left won't touch either. Now, there is a special parallelogram called a rhombus. And a rhombus is a parallelogram where all four sides are exactly the same length. So I'll try my best to draw an example of one for you. There we go. It looks about right, where all four sides have the same length, but this shape still does not have any square sides. And the last shape is the trapezoid. Now, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral that looks weird. It has two parallel lines and then two lines that don't intersect, that are not parallel. So they'll intersect at some point, like here. And this shape in the middle is the trapezoid. There's the rhombus, square, rectangle, and let me draw that. There is the parallelogram. Okay. And lastly, cubes. We just talked about cubes. Cubes are when we take squares and bring them into the third dimension. Now, what is the third dimension? Well, let's start first with a two-dimensional shape. This square. This square has one line going left and right and one line going up and down. That means it has two dimensions. It has height and width, which means how far left or right something goes. Okay, so I'm actually going to move that off to the side. Keep that example. So what does a 3D shape look like? Well, I'm going to draw a cube for us first, and then I will go ahead and make a example for you. So this cube, okay. So this cube has one line going up and down. It has one line going left and right, so it has height and width. But now it has a line going forward to backwards, and that's called depth. So it has 3 dimensions. This one has 2 dimensions. Now, a cube has 6 faces. A face is each 2D shape that makes it up. You can see here, 1, 2, and this top part is 3, 4, 5 on the bottom, and then the front side here is 6. And to draw a cube, you first start off by drawing 2 squares. One square. Then you draw another square inside the first one, starting from around the center. And then you connect the lines. And that's it.